This is a speaker meeting. Our speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker that you please remain seated until she has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Noreen. Thank you.
All right. Yes. They look better on him. It embraces his softer side. My name is Noreen and I'm an alcoholic. And I love the way you started the meeting out, John, because what I was reminded of was the 9th tradition, which is we ought be not organized. I want to give a shout out to my new friend Keith, who has 30 days today. So. You know, it really is a privilege that I'm here to speak. And I know whenever we go to these speaker meetings, we're like, I'm so grateful to be here. It's like, you know. And what's really funny about, you know, tomorrow being Halloween, you know, when I was a newcomer in AA, you know, first of all, I was suspect of everybody. And, you know, whenever, you know, I didn't even ever admit on my first, ever at 24 hours. And I think I maybe said I was a newcomer at 30 days. I just was like, leave me alone. And so like when I, you know, does anybody have like 60 days, I would raise my hand and then there would be an influx of people coming at me. And I used to call it zombie happy people. They're like, newcomer. They suck the life out of you. So I really can understand. So I was talking to these guys. How many people here are like around 28, 29 years old? All right. Okay. I got sober when I was 28. So you are looking at your future. Because my sobriety date is August 23rd, 1986. So I just celebrated a couple months ago 35 years of sobriety. Oh, yeah. I am a fossil in AA. I am. Cut me in half and count my rings. And, you know, one thing what you were talking about, I got, when I finally decided to join AA, when I was indoctrinated to be part of the group, I got sucked into Yes. So for those of you who, from years and years and years ago in the 80s, it wasn't called ASCII-PA, it was called Yes, which was Youth Enjoying Sobriety. And so actually I was at ASCII-PA, I'm actually also from Tucson. My home group though is up in Tempe. So it's Life in the Big Book. It meets 5:30s on Thursdays. It's a great home group. But I was at ASCII-PA down in Tucson and I was there when Prescott got the bid. So it was pretty exciting. So you definitely want to support, you know what they're doing because I'm going to jump around quite a bit because I'm caffeinated and I have some sugar in me. And so, but my daughter, my beautiful daughter, you know who I had in sobriety, God bless her. She had her 3rd DUI. She's a high achiever. And at 30 days of sobriety, she went to ASCII-PA. She's still sober. So, you know, one thing I know for sure is that I have to go to Al-Anon. I have to keep my mouth shut. You know, I can't help my daughter, but you guys can help my daughter. And that's how it works. You know, and one thing I love Prescott, and I decided to come up here on Thursday, you know, just to kind of like get up here and enjoy the mountains. And I went to, I was hiking Thumb Butte, and I was thinking about, you know, what do you know, you look at me, and like, when I remember when I was newly sober and I saw somebody had a year or 5 years or 10 years, I'm like, what it reminds me of when I hear people have like a lot of sobriety and they're at a meeting, it kind of reminds me when you go to homecoming at the football game and, you know, the guys are like, oh, I'm class of 75 and they're wearing their worn out leather sweater. I'm like, it's time to leave high school, dude, you know, like move on. and like, I'm, graduating in 71. It's like, oh my God, dude, leave. And that's how I kind of felt that people who had a lot of sobriety in AA were just desperate. And they need to just come back to the meetings for recognition. And I'm glad I'm remedial in AA. I'm glad I have a third grade level in AA because I am the walking example of contempt prior to investigation, which means I had AA all figured out, and I didn't want it. But I want to go back to, so when I was hiking up on Thumb Butte, I'm reflecting on what my life is like right now. I'm 63 years old, I'm in great shape, and I love hiking, and I'm thinking, what is one of the best things that I could ever say about being sober? But also, what about being sober and active in AA? Because I am very active, and I thought, the greatest joy that I have today is, first of all, peace of mind. And the other thing is that I don't care if I look bad. There's a line in the big book that says, we want to have an image we know we don't deserve. So, or like, that's one of the things, and, the delusion that we can wrest satisfaction if we only manage well. So I wanted to come in here looking good. So anyway, I have to call on myself. So yesterday I also got a massage here, and it was the greatest massage I ever had. And she also did cupping. Do you know what cupping is? Okay, so I have a back full of on my back. And my friend just texted me because I sent a picture. I'm like, oh my God, because I want to look good. I'm an old lady, and I have these old people hickeys on my back. I wish I could have a hickey. Oh my God, I walked into this dog groomer and this kid. I thought he had I didn't know what happened to him. And I'm like, oh God, are those hickeys? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well done, dude. And so just a little bit about Noreen, number one is I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I didn't like the label. I had it also a summary of what an alcoholic was, and I'm Irish. My mother and father are born in Ireland. They came off the boat, they got the brogue. I did 12 years of step dancing, so that's why I drank, And, one of the things, my parents didn't drink, and that's the other thing that I learned about is that alcoholism is a family disease. So, my parents were children of alcoholics, and my mother's father and my dad's father were horrible alcoholics, of course, in Ireland, and my dad's father went to the first alcoholic treatment center in Dublin in 1929. So just think that's only 6 years before Alcoholics Anonymous. And what my father tells is that it was called the Talbot Hospital. So if you ever hear about Father Talbot, that was, if you hear about, recovery in the treatment of alcoholism, he's kind of like the saint in Ireland is, Father Talbot. He's this patron saint of alcoholics in Ireland. There's a lot of them, and so my grandfather had shock treatment. I mean, they, just like cuckoo's nest, just that's how you treat alcoholics in Ireland. And so I asked my dad, I said, well, did your father ever drink? He said, no. And I said, well, what happened? He said he came home meaner. So back then, also in Ireland, they had a thing, that's where you hear the term about being on the wagon, because you took the pledge and you became a pioneer. And just for fun, I joined the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ, so I could get a pin and be a pioneer. So it's still a group, and it's all about praying and stuff like that, which I'm good with. But, how I became attracted to alcohol, so we would have these Irish, they're called sessions. So all these Irish people from Phoenix would come over to my parents' house, play the fiddle, sing and drink and drink and drink, and then start cursing the Queen and praising the IRA, and it was all a good time. And the men would drink Falstaff beer and these little shots, little shots of bourbon. So I'm like 6 or 7 years old, and we would pour these shot glasses for these old guys, and I was attracted to how they were. They were fun. My mom and dad were not fun. These guys were fun. And I was maybe 6 or 7, and I took a little shot, or what was left in the bottom of the shot glass, and I remember running my tongue on the shot glass and getting that burn of that bourbon. And I loved the burn of that bourbon. And so where does a 8, 7, 8, 9-year-old girl get bourbon? I was chasing a drink early. I needed that sense of ease and comfort. Because then on the other hand, and I'm a real, lover of the big book, is that when it talks about the fear, before I started drinking, I was a scared kid. I was scared of everything. And so how does a little girl find booze? Well, it's Robitussin. It is Vicks 44, my personal favorite, and NyQuil. Even though NyQuil, you got the shot glasses, so, it was okay. But I remember, I think I was even in my brownie uniform, coming home from school, pushing the chair to the stove, climbing on the stove, and opening up the door and just opening it up and knocking it back. And it was almost like automatic, and it was that ease. So I fast forward, I'm now 14 years old. I'm in Ireland visiting my cousins, and we decide to steal some beer. And and there's 4 of us, and there's 6 bottles of beer. And I immediately have to knock that one back so I have the second one. My first go at it. I have to have the next beer. So my first drunk, I landed in cow shit. I think I had my first kiss. His name was Martin McDonald. And of course I threw up, and I loved every moment of it. It was great, and I couldn't wait to do it again. And from the time I was 14 to the time I was 28 years old, I chased that first drunk, and it was just a life of false promises. I like to fantasize, I'm going to be, I'd sit there and drink, and I'd tell these stories, and I'm going to be somebody, and, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to do this, and it never happened. I started college, I quit college, I started college. The only thing, you guys, I ever finished in my life was my drink. I didn't finish anything, so it was that false promises, and, I even remember, early on, watching and comparing you. You only had 2 glasses of Chablis, I better slow down. He's knocking back this, so it was a lot of work. Being an alcoholic is a lot of work, especially, covering bad checks, covering up lies, not getting caught stealing from your parents. And so people say, oh, AA is so hard. That's hard. This is easy. Simple but not easy. That's what it says in the book, simple but not easy. But never, that's the other thing about being an alcoholic, which is a label. Now, to that point, so this side of the room are the alcoholics. So this side of the room are the Al-Anons. And that was what my mother was. And so being at these Irish dances and being at these Irish events in Phoenix, some of these old guys would get carried away, and they'd get the microphone and they'd be singing and crying, Danny Boy, and my mother and these other wives, they would always sit in the back of the room. I called them the cats, because they would. And my mother was the ringleader, and in her brogue she'd say, look at him, the shame of him, You know, the shame, you know. And then she'd hit my dad, go get him off, get the microphone, get away. So what I noticed was that, so I'm watching her, watching him, and I'm realizing he's an embarrassment. He is not wanted. And we don't want him around. So my first thought was, and he also lived on the west side of Phoenix. So I had my summarization. An alcoholic is a man. He lives in West Phoenix, and his family doesn't want him. So when people would come to me and say, God, geez, you're a drunk, I'm like, I don't live in the west side. You know, I was like, well, go figure. But I knew that. And the other thing that happened was my mother and these other ladies would not talk to his wife or the other drunks' wives. So what you also see is that the alcoholic is not wanted, but we also alienate their family. So, you know, it's like we don't, you know, alcoholics are bad. So, and then, I don't know if you guys, there's some people my age around here. During the 60s and 70s, at the end of when the TVs would you know, at the end of the program, they would have public service announcements. So there would be these dour commercials from Alcoholics Anonymous. So you'd see these men in a circle, mopey, and it's like, if you have a problem with alcohol, call Alcoholics Anonymous. We care. It's like, hell no, you know? And so, you know, so that's Alcoholics Anonymous, and then there's Noreen, you know, and, you know, but alcohol, you know, like it says in Bill's story, you know, I had arrived, so now I'm like, you know, thinking I'm somebody, and then all of a sudden alcohol is getting worse, and then it says gradually things got worse. So then in my 20s, I decided to do one geographical. And I decided, I got dumped. I had my wedding dress, I had the church, everything. This guy dumped me at the altar. Yeah. It was terrible. Bastard. I gotta pray for him still, 40 years later. I'll get over it. So I decided, you know what? I can't live in Scottsdale anymore. I'm gonna go live in Greer, Arizona. So I thought, you know, I'm gonna ride horses, I'm gonna be a cowgirl, you know, I'm gonna be like Audra Barkley of the, you know, big, you know, whatever TV show that was. And my first night in Greer, I got a job at Molly Butler's, if anybody knows Molly Butler's. My very first night, I met the owner of Greer Lodge. He had a ton of Go Fast Peruvian marching powder that I loved because you could drink more. And the next, you know, I wake up to him like, ooh. And I did one of my many walk of shames down Greer, you know. There I am. It's in the 80s, so I had the big shoulder pads and carrying my sandals. I should have had cowboy boots. And I remember heading back to Molly Butler's thinking, how did this happen to me? And like it says in the book, when you ask an alcoholic how, you know, why they get in these scrapes or how they get into this, why do they drink the way they do, they say they don't know. And, you know, how many times have you all been like, you know, a family member or a loved one shook you and said, why are you doing this? And it's like, I don't know. I just want to have fun. And alcohol ceased to be a luxury. You know, it became a necessity. And, you know, I'm grateful for, you know, the white stuff because it got me to my bottom. You know, it did. And so I call it my spiritual tsunami. And if you guys know what a tsunami is, it kind of pulls back like this, and then the next thing you know, it just falls down on you. And that's what happened with my drinking. I could sense something. So this is February 1986, and I could sense there was something. And I did all those prayers. You know, I was raised a good Catholic, of course. You know, and I became a non-believer in second grade. You know, it was, and for those of you who struggle with the spiritual aspect of Alcoholics Anonymous, please, you know, don't don't quit before the miracle happens, because I'm one of those people that came with such contempt about the religious aspect of it. Because, what I know about the way I was raised religiously was, number one, I was born with original sin, which means I'm a baseball fan, so I already got a strike. I'm at the plate and it's like, what? And the only way that I could be good in God's eyes, at least the nuns that raised me, is that I had to die. You need to be like Saint Aloysius of Cambria. He was hung upside down and had his eyes gouged out. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. But so, and then on top of that is I like to sin. I'm a sinner. I like carnal knowledge. I like screwing around. I like ripping people off. So the other thing is that I don't know if God really wants me. So when I go to these meetings and they say God is all loving and forgiving, I'm like, what I had to do in my spiritual aspect of it, when I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, is I had to totally undo all those old beliefs and get my all new set of beliefs. And I'll talk about that. But so I did those prayers like, God, please let that check clear. Please don't let me be pregnant. Those kind of things. And then what would happen is that when I would get out of that mess, and there I am like snorting coke again, and I would say, sorry God, but when it says like deep down, we really don't mean that. When it says deep down inside of us is the fundamental concept of God. See, God to me was like up in the heavens, with the robe, looking like Charlton Heston. That's who my God was. And I just could not believe that there would be someone who would forgive me. So I got to tell one story because I'm looking here. So when I talk about not wanting to look bad, when I'm here in AA, I didn't want to say anything. I want to be invisible. But when I was a party girl, I worked at a bar. Where do drunks work? They work at bars, and they steal from the bars. And so anyway, so now this is like 1985, and I was working at a bar in Tempe called the Dirty Drummer. High class place, very fine place. And so it's like maybe 6 months before I'm getting sober. So so of course I'm green because I drink too much and do too much cocaine. I had the little tube top on and those racy little running shorts, and my song came on the jukebox, which was Rebel Yell by Billy Idol. In the midnight hour, she wants more. So I'm like, yeah! So, pool table. So I'm sitting in the booth, and it's a Friday night. So I'm like, I'm sitting in the booth, and I get to stand up on the booth, more, and there were ceiling fans. And thank God they weren't going very fast. So I'm like, yeah, thud. And all my friends are like, oh my God, she's such a loser. So I just kind of like slink down thinking like nobody saw me. So much for my great attempt to be a table dancer, Billy Idol, And so, of course, what do? I don't go to the bar for like 2 days. And I'm like, dear God, please let everybody be drunk so they don't remember me. So I kind of walk in, and they're like, that's that one. So I could, so you know what? I was, even though I like blew it off, I was mortified and I wanted to die because I was so humiliated. I don't like looking bad. So anyway, I have a fondness for ceiling fans and Billy Idol. So anyway, so my bottom, I am going to get sober, I promise you guys. The last night that I drank, and just so you guys know, I never once in my life ever thought I had a drinking problem. Never once did I ever ask for help. And I just thought I was sensitive, and I had a lot of mishaps. And the last night that I drank, August 22nd, it was just a regular night. I went to the Dirty Drummer, and, met up with some friends, bought a bunch of cocaine, and we went back to this friend's house, and we started drinking and doing shots, and drinking and doing shots and doing cocaine. And what happened to me that night was also the only time it ever happened, is that I could not get drunk. I couldn't get where I wanted to go, and I kept at it. And the other thing that happened to me is that I had this insatiable physical craving. I had the horrible craving that I could have kept drinking and drinking, and I had the thirst. And so all of a sudden now it's like 1 a.m. People are like, I gotta go to work. I'm driving around Tempe. I'm knocking on friends' doors saying, I need a drink. And they're like, go home. And I'm like, get out of here. And I'm so grateful because that 7-Eleven at McClintock and Apache in Tempe is still there. And now it's 7 a.m. and I am sitting outside that 7-Eleven, and people are now trying to go to work. And I'm sitting in my alcoholic car. Every time it turns left, the horn goes off. When I gun it, all the bottles roll back. When I brake, all the bottles roll forward. And I'm like, how am I going to steal this beer? And I go to this, so then I end up leaving there, and I go to this guy's house. I knock on the door, and he said, Noreen, just go in my bedroom and just pass out. And I said, okay. And I went into his room. He went to work. And I sat on the edge of the bed, and I said, dear God, I can't do this anymore. And you guys, my compulsion to drink left me at that moment, and I've never drank since then. August 23rd, 1986. And so there has to be a power. There has to be something that would let this idiot Mick, who didn't think, and it was gone. So here's the deal, though, is that I did not know how to live sober. I mean, I am a freak. I don't know how to socialize. I don't know how to talk to you, and so I ended up going to a 10-day detox. The first meeting I went to was not AA, it was CA. And I like CA because they went bowling, they went tubing, we went to bars. And back in '86, there weren't a lot of people in CA. So I was chairing meetings at like 30 days. It's like, oh my God. But, and the other thing is that I still didn't like the label of being an alcoholic, so I liked being an addict. That looked good on me. Janis Joplin, addict just seemed edgier. So again, I wanted a good label. I wanted a better label. Yeah, you want to be a coke snorting addict instead of an alcoholic. I mean, it's like, that just shows you. So my first year, though, I do want to tell you is that I audited AA meetings. I did a lot of drive-bys. But I had asked women to sponsor me, and they said no. And so I'm already judging you that I'm better than you, and then I ask you for help, and you reject me. So that was tough. So that's why one of the things that, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, when I'm in a meeting, I will always speak about the solution and the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because, you guys, I went without a sponsor for a year. But when you would talk about, I got to do 90 and 90, or you talked about I got to pay this person back, I listened to you, I listened to you, I listened to you. And I was, and I also judged you, which was, you look like you're having a lot of fun. I like the people that smiled and didn't look like they had a care in the world. So it's like, I like what you have. And then I hear, that the people who seemed like they didn't have a care in the world were the people that were doing the deal. And so, I remember, so I have to tell you this. So I was chairing this meeting, the CA meeting in Scottsdale, and right above was a young people's meeting. It was a 2-story. So these little disrespectful young people, AAers, they would walk by my meeting, because no one ever attended, and they'd say, hey, throw some water on this meeting, maybe it'll grow. I'm like, But they were just really, really cheeky and really fun. And these kids were 19, 21, 23 years old. They were sober like 2 or 3 years. And what's so amazing is that we ended up all being on the YES convention, the ASCII Yes convention. And sadly, 2 years ago, our treasurer passed away from cancer, and we're all at his funeral. And our committee, all those guys are still sober. And, here we are in the front row, and it didn't look like AA, it looked like AARP, man. We're all like gray. Wearing sensible shoes and talking about, taking cholesterol medicine. But, it was, I'm so grateful for being part of Young People's AA, because we did road trips up to Prescott. We would all get in a car and drive up here and go to meetings. We did dances, and, it was such a wonderful time. And I finally got a sponsor, and how she sponsors is how her sponsor. And I got, for those of you who might know the Phoenix, I got sober at 48, and that is a very, hardcore. And I hate to even say hardcore, because what they do is that they do the big book, they do the steps out of the big book. You have to have a service position, you sponsor, that's how it was done then. And now today, it's called hardcore, But I'll never forget, the God thing. And there was this little Mexican guy, his name was Felix, and he had a club foot, and I'll never forget him. And he was at 48, and I happened to be in a circle talking to him, and I told him, and I said, "Are you Catholic?" And he said, "Yeah, I was." And I said, "Me too." And I said, I just want, when it says God of your own understanding. And he said, "Let me ask you." He said, "What, if you had a God, what would you want?" And I said, "I want him to have a good sense of humor. I want him to love me unconditionally. I want him to forgive me. And I want to know him." And he goes, "That's your God, man." Just like that. And it was too good to be true. But when he said that, the higher power to me was always out there, or up in the mountain, or in the heaven. When they said that if you are to find God, the desire must come from within. That's in working with others. Or God does not make too hard of terms to those who seek him. And when we talk about like thawing out, our hearts and just surrendering, I fought it. I'll tell you guys, I didn't do my steps till I was like 3 years, because I wanted to I wanted to test it. So this book is big and has no pictures, and it's kind of heady. So when I was I wanted to say that I did the steps. But this was a lot of work. So I decided, I'll go to Gift-A-Non, and I'll do my own fourth step. So I go to the Gift-A-Non, and I see a pamphlet. Great, it's only like this big. So I decided to buy a fourth step inventory. So I go home and open this pamphlet, and I start doing my fourth step. I'm like, this doesn't even, so it didn't even make sense. So of course I threw it away because I didn't understand it. Well, like 2 years later, I'm cleaning out my drawer, and I find what I had purchased was an Al-Anon fourth step. So when it kept saying, "Does his drinking bother you?" I'm like, who's he? Does he, lie to you? Who is he? I mean, I couldn't even get a fourth step right, So when it says we try to do things ourselves, I know I'm getting close on time here, and I want to get current, but a couple things that have, so you got to remember, I'm sober a lot longer now than I drank. And so, when it says alcohol is but a symptom, we must get down to causes and conditions. First of all, I made all my amends. When I stole from that guy up in Greer Lodge, I got kicked out of that town for stealing. When I went back and made amends to him, when I said, Jake, I need to make this right with you. He said, "I've been waiting 5 years for this." And it's like, that's what we do to people. But I'll tell you, for those of us who have made our amends, I want to tell you, there is nothing that is a greater relief than making amends. I promise you that. And I loved hash. I wish I would have done ecstasy. It sounds like it would have been fun. But, but even any of that stuff, I promise you, is nothing better than being free. There's nothing than being free. And I can look anybody in the eye. I've made all my financial amends. I've made all my amends. And a lot of times when people come in and out, they're like, oh, I didn't get through my 5th step. My experience of 35 years in AA, what really is the sticky wicket from what I see, especially with the ladies that I sponsor, is the leveling of our pride. We don't like to look bad. I don't like telling someone that I burn them. And I want to tell you, I've done some of my worst damage in sobriety. One note, when I was 11 years sober, I stopped going to AA. I thought, oh, I'm going to go shop for a husband. I'm going to have some alcoholic kids. I'm going to have a good job. I'm going to do that. And it took me, like I said, I'm remedial. I only stopped going to AA for 4 months. And my separation from God, all that insanity, and it took me a long time to get that back. And then, at 18 years, I had a really good job. I lost my job. I'd never been unemployed. It's great to love God when you got a lot of money, but when you're broke, it's like, God, and I took my life and my will back, and at 25 years of sobriety, I lost it all. I lost everything. It was, back in 2009 in the financial, I had a business, and during that time, my kid, this is down in Tucson, also during that time, the kids that my kids hung around with, there were 3 heroin deaths in 1 year. I knew 2 of the boys very closely. One of them was at my house the day he died. And that heartache, I drank and drugged to relieve pain. I can promise you pain is temporary, but as a mom and seeing children, losing children, this boy was like a kid to me. I didn't ever want to drink, but there was a lot of time that I wanted to die. There was a lot of times, but I am the walking example that problems are temporary. And, you may have 30 days and you're coming up on your 30 days, Alan. You and I work the same program. There's no elevated, when it says right before the 3rd step prayer, we stay close to him and do his work well, And if there's one page, like if I were to go out on a desert island and I could only take one page in the big book, that would be a vision for you. Because the first line in A Vision for You says, we know only a little. God will constantly disclose to you and others. And I got to tell you guys, I am happier today than I've ever been in my recovery. And I had to think about, what am I so happy about? 5 years ago, I started doing jails. And that's down in Tucson. Like I turned that business around, and just so you guys know, I got I had all my material, and I had all my material taken away. I have all my material shit back, but today that still doesn't matter, because there's nothing like having that peace of mind. But there's nothing more honorable than when it says in how it work, or in working with others, we can help where no one else can. And there is so when I'm thinking like, I can't relate to how are these girls going to relate to a 60-year-old white woman, so already I had contempt. And thank God my friend said, shut up. And so we started going in there, and it's been the most wonderful experience for me to do the jails. And I can't wait to go back into the jails, after COVID. And I think, there's something powerful that when it says we're altruistic, which means we do what we do for no benefit, no money, nothing. That is a power that nobody can harness what Alcoholics Anonymous does. And I'm really glad that you guys are all here, not watching that Houston game. And when I say to you that I want you to stay sober, Keith, and you, Ellen, I mean that. I'm not gonna be crazy zombie woman on you. You know, and I don't think I have anything else to say, but it really is a privilege that you guys asked me to come up here because it's an honor to speak for Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.